Hey guys, today I'm going to teach you all about angle relationships, specifically about parallel lines and transversals. By the end of this lesson, you'll be able to determine angle measurements with and without using a protractor. So go ahead and get out your binder, turn to the math section, and get ready to take some notes. Let's start by reviewing some angle basics. Let's look at these four types of angles that you might see. An angle is made up of a vertex and two lines or rays that come off of it. We measure angles in degrees, just like we would measure length in inches or centimeters, but an angle measures the amount of space between two lines. We see and hear about angles all the time in our daily lives. In construction, you would use angles when you're building something. If you were an artist, you would use angles when you're thinking about how you need to hold your pen. You play golf or tennis, the angle that you hit the ball. When you're on a road and the roads intersect or run perpendicular or run parallel, all these things have to do with angles. So let's get some definitions for math. We classify angles based on their measurement, and we measure angles using a protractor. Here's how you do that. You always want to put the vertex aligned with the center point of the protractor. So right there's the center. And it starts at 0. Now here's the thing about the protractor. There's blue and black numbers bordering it. You want to use the numbers that make sense with how your angle is opening. So since this is the direction that the angle is facing starting at 0, I'm going to look at the blue numbers. This flat line is my 0 because it's not open yet. But as I open the angle, I follow the blue numbers, and I can see that the angle measurement for this angle is 135 degrees. I know it's not 45 degrees, which is a mistake a lot of people make, because it didn't open up from 0 on the black line. It opened up from 0 on the blue line. So it just depends on which direction it's facing. I also know that this is a bigger than 90-degree angle because this is a right angle. A right angle measures 90 degrees, and we measure other angles and label them based on how they relate to a 90-degree angle. So if this one is bigger than a right angle or bigger than 90 degrees, we'd call that obtuse. Same thing for this little one. This little angle next to it is less than 90 degrees. Take a second and pause the video and see if you can figure out, looking at this protractor, how many degrees does this angle measure? You should see that it measures 30 degrees. Since it's a 30-degree angle, this is an acute angle. So right angles are 90 degrees. Anything less than 90 degrees is called acute, and anything greater than 90 degrees is called obtuse. The way I remember that is acute little angles are little and less than 90. This other angle here at the bottom is a straight angle. When I put my protractor on it, it goes from 0 all the way to 180. It's like this angle is a door that's been opened all the way. So that means that an open angle like this is a straight angle. These are your four big types of angles that you might see in everyday life. The other thing that you might start to see are angle pair relationships, which is when we take one big angle and we kind of cut it in different ways. For example, in this first picture, I'm looking at an obtuse angle that's been cut by this red line. What that line did was split this big obtuse angle into two smaller angles, 1 and 2. There is a term for two angles that share that same line. Two angles that share a common side and vertex are called adjacent angles. I remember that when I think adjacent, I think they're next door neighbors. They're right next door to each other. So you look in the other pictures, 1 and 2 are adjacent angles. 1 and 2 are also adjacent angles here. In the vertical angles picture, 1 and 3 are adjacent angles. 1 and 4 are adjacent angles. But 1 and 2 are not adjacent. They are opposite each other. And that's why 1 and 2 are called vertical angles. Vertical angles are exactly opposite or across from each other. It's like they're looking in the mirror. They share a common vertex, but they do not share a common side. I always think about it like they're looking in the mirror because opposite angles are congruent. If angle 1 measured 30 degrees, angle 2 would measure 30 degrees. If angle 3 measured 150, guess what? Angle 4 would measure 150. Vertical angles are congruent. So if they're opposite each other, they are the same. Let's look at another angle pair relationship that you need to know. Complementary angles are made up when you have a right angle that is cut by another line. So this right angle makes an L shape, and it's cut by this line into two angles. The rule about complementary angles is that any two angles in a right angle are called complementary. Since angles 1 and 2 make a right angle, they add to equal 90 degrees. So a question you could be asked is, if angle 2 is 30 degrees, what's the measure of angle 1, or x? In this case, you know that angle 1 and angle 2 are complementary. So x plus 30 equals 90. You should know that x would equal 60. Angle 1 is 60 degrees because 1 and 2 are complementary angles. Knowing angle pair relationships helps you solve for missing angles. Let's look at one more type of relationship. It's called supplementary. And if you notice, it's when you have two angles that make up a straight angle. This is a straight angle that is cut by a line. Angle 1 and 2 are called supplementary because they add up to 180 degrees, since there's 180 degrees in a straight line. So knowing this information about angle relationships can help you solve for missing angles. For example, if you knew that angle 2 was 50 degrees, you could solve for this missing angle x because you know that in total, angle 1 and angle 2 have a sum of 180. So x plus 50 equals 180. You should know x would be 130 degrees. Angle 1 is supplementary to angle 2. Together, they add up to equal 180 degrees because they fall in a straight line. So you see another example of that in the vertical angle example. 1 and 3 are supplementary angles because I can connect them to make a straight line on the green line. So if I know angle 1, not only do I know angle 2 because they're vertical, I also know angle 3 because they're supplementary. The biggest two that you should know after today are vertical angles and supplementary angles because we're going to use them when we talk about parallel lines and transversals. So let's go ahead and get into our conversation about parallel lines and transversals and learn about a couple more angle relationships. In this picture below, you see line X and line Y are parallel to each other. That means that they are going to go on and on forever and never touch. They're parallel. Line T is what we call a transversal. A transversal is a straight line that intersects two parallel lines. A transversal creates some special angle relationships. So let's see if we can figure them out for ourselves first. We're going to use a protractor to measure each of the 8 angles that are formed. If you don't have a protractor, just follow along in the video and I'm going to go over it with you. Go ahead and pause now to find the measure of angles A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H, and then press play when you're ready to check. All right, so after measuring the angles, I saw that angle B, angle D, angle F, and angle G all had angle measurements of 60 degrees. I also noticed that angle A, C, E, and H all had measurements of 120 degrees. It's kind of cool how you measured 8 different angles and there's only 2 numbers. That's because there's different angle relationships that you already know here. Angle B and angle D are across from each other. If 2 angles are vertical, then they are congruent. Angle A and angle C are also vertical angles. You can also see that angle A and angle D are supplementary because they fall on a straight line. That means they add up to equal 180. Same for angle A and angle B. So the cool thing about a transversal cutting through these parallel lines is that there will always only be 2 angle measurements. There will only be 2 numbers that you'll need to use. You just have to figure out where to put them. Other thing you'll have to do is label these or name these. So we're going to label the inside of the parallel lines called the interior, just like you would a car. The interior of your car or of your house is the inside. So the inside is the in-between of the 2 parallel lines. That means that outside of the parallel lines is called the exterior. So we're going to label everything above that exterior, which just means outside. So angles D, C, E, and F are all interior angles. Angle A and B and angles G and H are exterior because they're outside. They open up to the world. All right, so here's a lot of information about these different types of angle pair relationships formed by transversals. We're going to go through them one at a time and use the picture above to label them. So vertical angles, we already know. They're pairs of opposite angles formed by intersecting lines. So opposite angles are vertical. That means they're congruent. So like we said, D and B, A and C, E and H, and G and F. So they're the same color and they're opposite each other. They're the same. The next thing we need to know are straight angles, which again, we already know. Now they're just formed by transversals. So straight angles form a straight line. So they add up to be 180 degrees and they're also called supplementary. So when we look at the picture above, D and A are supplementary because they fall on that same line. You could also look at the line horizontally, this red line, and see that angle A and angle B are supplementary angles because that is a straight line. So that is a straight angle. The next ones are different, and you might not have heard of these before. So the alternate interior angles are angles inside the parallel lines, and that makes sense because they're interior and on opposite sides of the transversal. So we're going to look at D and F. The relationship between D and F is that they're on opposite sides of the transversal. That means that they are congruent. If you look, they are both blue. So if you look down here, the other version of that is alternate exterior angles. That means that they're angles outside of the parallel lines and on the opposite sides of the transversal. So alternate exterior angles are the matching angles that are on the outsides. So we look at the exterior. You hear alternate, you should hear congruent. Alternate angles are congruent as well. So these alternate exterior angles would be like A and H since they are matching. And angles B and G are alternate exterior angles because they're on the outside of the lines and they are congruent. To be perfectly honest with you, the only things that I really care about are vertical angles, straight angles, and then corresponding angles. And here's why. Corresponding angles are in the matching corners. So if you look at this transversal, what you should notice is that there's kind of two sections. These two things make up four corners that are going to be exactly the same in both places. So A matches with E. B matches with F. And if you know those names for alternate exterior and alternate interior and stuff, that's awesome. But the most important thing you can do is if you have one angle measurement, you can fill them all out. Because if you know angle A and C are vertical, they're the same. If you know angle A and B are supplementary because they're on a straight angle, then you know that this would be 60. If you can look at these and find out which ones are corresponding to each other, which is another word for matching, then you would know that A corresponds with E. They're both in the top left-hand corner of the transversal. Same for angle B. It corresponds with angle F because they're in the top right-hand corner. So it's just matching. So the most important things you should know are vertical angles, straight angles, and corresponding angles. Like I said, alternate interior and alternate exterior are just awesome to know those vocab words, but the rule is that they're just congruent. Use words like interior and exterior to help you figure out that for the clue. So let's practice what I'm talking about. The definitions are great, but really what we want to do is apply what we know about angle relationships to figure out missing angles. So we're going to use what we know about parallel lines and transversals to label all the missing angles in the picture given just one angle. So take a second, pause the video now, and try to fill out all of the missing angles by yourself. If you can, label, and that would be awesome. So pause now and then press play and you're ready to check. All right, so when I look at this, I know that vertical angles are congruent. So let me just show you that in blue here. The vertical angles would be what are across from each other. And since they're congruent, they'll be the same. So if that one was 75 degrees, this will be 75 degrees as well. Now, the next thing that I like to do is to find the straight angles. And maybe you went in a different order. But when I look at straight angles, I look for the straight line. I know that together, these angles are supplementary, which means they add up to be 180 degrees. 180 minus 75 is 105. So I know that 105 degrees would be this missing angle measurement. And then you could have done it the other way as well. And you could have found that 105 goes here because this is a straight angle as well. But now that I have 105 here, I know that it is vertical to the one across from it. So this missing angle in the top corner is 105 degrees as well. So this is our first section of this transversal. These four corners match with these four corners. So what you want to do is just copy these measurements into where they match here. That means they're corresponding. So if that top left is 75, that one's 75. This is 105, the top right. This is 105 because it's vertical, and this one's 75. So transversals are awesome because you only need one angle measurement to fill out 8. What you need to know now is some of those definitions. So exterior angles would be the outsides. 105 and 105 here are exterior and they're matching. So I would call those alternate exterior angles. Same for these 105s on the inside or these 75s on the inside. So those are the special words you can know. The big takeaway for you should be to notice that when parallel lines are crossed by a transversal, any two pairs of the angles formed will either be congruent or supplementary. And that's it. So here's two transversals that I want you to look at and answer questions 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 by yourself. Pause the video now and then press play when you're ready to check. All right, so here's your answers. You can pause the video now and check them yourself. I'm just going to go over some of these with you. So the measure of angle 3 is given to you because you know the measure of angle 2 is 55 degrees. So angle 3 would be opposite it. It helps me to color code. So I would take something colored like a colored pencil or a pen, and I would mark out on there those spots. Well, after I do that, I would mark out their corresponding spots on the bottom part of the transversal. So question 2 says find the measure of angle 7. And angle 7 is on the outside. So that's a clue that it's exterior. And since it's matching with angle 3, it's an alternate exterior angle. And alternate exterior angles are congruent. I want to look at this transversal because this one cuts through two lines that are vertical. These parallel lines are vertical, so it's the same thing that we looked at before, except instead of the top and the bottom being exterior, the exterior is here and here. Those are exterior because they're outside of where the parallel lines are. Inside is the interior. So if you're given angle 4, you know that it's inside or interior, and angle 5 is also interior, but on the other side. Since it's like switch sides and it's on the inside, that's why I know of as alternate anterior angles, and they're congruent. So that's your other clue. They're either congruent or supplementary. And if you look on this chart, congruent is most of the time what they're going to be. Supplementary is only formed whenever there are straight angles. And then angle 1 and angle 5 are in the same spot of the picture. If you did like the little circle thing, angle 1 and angle 5 would be in the same spot. So they are congruent and corresponding angles. Okay, so you can look at question 3 and 4's transversal and diagram to answer question 5. There's 5 true or false questions here for you to answer. And if it's false, explain why to the right. So pause the video now, try those by yourself, and then press play when you're ready to check. Okay, so the first 3 are false, and here's the explanations why. And then the last 2 are true. All right, guys, that's it. If you made it to the end of this video, please put in the comments, what is your favorite type of angle? Mine are acute angles because they're so cute. Today, we learned all about parallel lines and transversals and how those affect angle relationships. So now you should be able to determine some angle measurements with and without using a protractor. Now you should go ahead and go back to the calendar and complete any other assignments you have left for the day. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.